Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 152 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. We've reached the end of another month, and so it's time for me to thank my May patrons. Mike Sterling, Justin Bailey, Lily Breen, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Aaron Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, and Matthew Saint. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to join in with helping the show out, it's just $1 per month, and that gets you this monthly shout out, as well as audio outtakes and full scripts of every written show. This week's topic comes via suggestion from listener Tiffany T. She wrote, "Not really a specific question, but I went to the Peterson Museum and saw a small history for the Batmobile there, and thought a podcast about the significance of vehicles in comics might be interesting." For those unaware, the Peterson is an automotive museum in Los Angeles. They have exhibits on all sorts of cars and car-related items, including a Cars of Film and TV, which includes one of the 1989 Batmobiles. Tiffany took a picture of the display she saw that inspired her to write in, and I'll include that in the show notes at the website. However, the Batmobile's history has been covered many times over by people better qualified to talk cars than I am. So I thought I'd take a closer look at one of the more ridiculous vehicles in comic book history, and that is none other than the Spider-Mobile, also sometimes called the Spider Buggy. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Spider-Man can web-sling across the city, no problem. What does he need with a car? Well, it turns out he doesn't. But that really doesn't matter when it comes to merchandising, and that's exactly why this contraption showed up in the comics. While there are conflicting details depending on which article you read, either a toy company approached Stan Lee to make toy cars for a bunch of their characters, or Stan approached various toy companies with the idea, and the Spider-Mobile was put into the comics in order to potentially tie into this marketing collaboration. The beginnings of this story were in Amazing Spider-Man 126, just 4 months after the seminal two-part storyline in which Gwen Stacy dies at the hands of Norman Osborn, who himself perishes at the end of the story. So perhaps this was a way to also add in a little lighthearted fun into the books so shortly after that grim milestone. The issue begins with two people calling out to Spider-Man from a roof as he's web-slinging across the city. They turn out to be two ad executives who just landed a contract with Corona Motors, a car manufacturer who has recently unveiled a pollution-free engine. The ad execs ask Spider-Man to build a Spider-Mobile using Corona's engine in order to advertise the new motor. Spidey rightfully says no and swings off. However, he's quickly reminded of bills that are due, and so later that issue returns to Carter and Lombardo, the ad agency, and agrees to build the car in exchange for $1,000 cash. Now, a brand new car at the time this was printed averaged around $4,000, so assuming he got the engine for free, Spidey probably could build a car from parts and still make out with a little extra money. That is, if Spider-Man knew how to build a car. Unfortunately, while oftentimes being a scientist of any sorts in comics means you know how to make nearly anything, Peter admits to himself that automotive engineering is not his area of expertise, and so recruits a friend to assist him. Said friend being Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. In fact, Spider-Man basically hands the assignment off to Johnny, checking in with him occasionally to find out the progress. This goes on for the next few issues, including Amazing Spider-Man number 129, which means the first appearance of the Punisher also has Spider-Man thinking about the Spider-Mobile he's going to have in the near future. Finally, in issue 130, the Spider-Mobile is unveiled in all its glory? Of course, I'll have an image of it in the show notes, but for now, you can imagine it as a dune buggy painted in blue with red webbed trim in order to emulate Spider-Man's costume, with hubcaps that look like Spider-Man's mask. In addition to the regular features of a car, it also had a spider signal light, similar to the one in Spider-Man's belt, and also had web shooters. In addition, Johnny added an ejector seat to the car, because according to him, all superhero vehicles should have one, and also gave it a switch that, when flipped, added a roof and extra panels in plain colors which disguised the Spider-Mobile as a standard car. When Spider-Man and the Torch take the car out for its inaugural test run, we find the second reason why the Spider-Mobile was a bad idea. It turns out, up to this point, Peter had never actually gotten a driver's license. Although in the very early days of his book, he would occasionally drive a small motorized bike, but apparently that was not an issue back then. Torch gave him some quick driving lessons, which apparently Peter picked up quickly, as later that night he used the vehicle on his own to capture some of Hammerhead's goons, a recurring villain in the book during Conway's run. He has much less luck when he faces off against Hammerhead himself in the following issue, and the car ends up on its side after a blow from the metal-plated skull of Hammerhead. Spider-Man gets knocked out by his foe shortly thereafter, but Hammerhead takes off rather than taking advantage of the situation, and when Spider-Man awakes, he turns his car upright again and drives off, camouflaging the car after parking it near his destination. Spider-Man's adventures continue for months before we see the vehicle again in issue 141. Spidey says that he's been using it to comb the burrows for the Jackal, who first showed up in issue number 129. He's the one who sicked the Punisher on Spidey in that issue, and had been a thorn in the web-slinger's side since then. But as this issue opens, the cops are chasing Spider-Man down, and right after he successfully gets away from them, he ends up driving down a pier that, thanks to Mysterio's illusions, appeared to be a regular New York alleyway, and sends the Spider-Mobile into the water. You would think that would be the end for this four-wheeled monstrosity, but even vehicles don't stay dead in comics. After finding out that the ad execs were planning to sue if he didn't return the Spider-Mobile to them, Spider-Man investigated the crash site a couple of times. First trying to figure out how to retrieve the vehicle, but then discovering it missing in issue number 157. 2 issues later, a mysterious figure is seen fixing the car up, intending to use it against the wall crawler. He makes good on his intentions the next issue, number 160, when the car shows up right after Spidey is hit by a gas bomb. The Spider-Mobile, apparently driving by itself, tries to run Spider-Man over. Normally, this would be an easy thing for him to avoid, but at the same time, Peter's web shooters get stuck, and he seems to lose his ability to stick to walls, so Spider-Man has to use a makeshift pole vault to get up and over a wall away from the homicidal vehicle. After a brief interlude, the car returns to attack Spider-Man again. While Peter stays up above this time, the dune buggy is now somehow able to drive up walls and follows Spidey and, using its own web shooters, captures Spider-Man, taking him back to the Tinkerer, the mechanical genius who was behind these vehicular attacks. Side note, this was only the Tinkerer's second appearance, his first being all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man number 2. Since then, he's become a recurring character who tends to be hired to build devices for other villains, rather than face down any heroes directly. Unsurprisingly, Spider-Man is able to take out the Tinkerer, his henchman, called Toy, and the car, which he promptly returns to Carter and Lombardo, albeit in sad condition after the fight. Now, thanks to Dan Slott, we got a retconned adventure of the Spider-Mobile in the 3rd issue of the Spider-Man/Human Torch miniseries, where the pair use the vehicle to fight the Red Ghost and his super apes. It also has the ability to climb up walls in this appearance, but that's from a special gadget the two heroes borrowed from Mr. Fantastic and definitely gave back at the end of that adventure. But apparently the Tinkerer copied that ability later. Since then, in mainstream continuity, we've seen the original Spider-Mobile twice, other than occasional flashbacks. The first time was in a backup story in Amazing Spider-Man number 600, written by Zeb Wells and drawn by Derek Donovan. Either a replica or a fixed-up original is on display at the Smithsonian National Design Museum, where all of the visitors are mocking the outrageous vehicle, including Peter Parker's date, Nora Winters. Then, a few years later, in the Joe Kelly-Ed McGuinness series, Spider-Man Deadpool, which lasted a full 50 issues, Wade Wilson fixes up the Spider Buggy and repaints it, rechristening it the Dead Buggy. Apparently, Tinkerer's modification stuck around, literally, as the Dead Buggy is constantly seen not only driving up, but sticking to walls while parked. In addition to these more relatively recent appearances in the regular 616 universe, the Spider-Mobile has shown up in various alternate timelines, including the Old Man Logan story by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven, in animated form in the Ultimate Spider-Man TV series, in an imaginary sequence, and as a background gag in the film Into the Spider-Verse. Finally, I have to mention the version that shows up in issue 12 of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, published in 2015. This issue, taking place during the Spider-Verse crossover story, is written by Dan Slott and drawn by Giuseppe Camuncoli. Featuring many spider heroes from across the multiverse, one of these heroes is none other than a sentient Spider-Mobile that helps defeat the Inheritors, the group trying to kill the various versions of Spider-Man. While we don't get much of his backstory in the book itself, writer Dan Slott has said in various places that he thought of the character as being from a universe similar to the Pixar movie Cars, and that this Spider-Mobile would be able to change form, just like the original, so that it could have a secret identity named Peter Parked Car. That covers basically everything you'd ever want to know, and probably more, about the Spider-Mobile. We have one more episode before we get into the Secret Invasion TV show Deep Dive. But before we do that, next episode will cover another unusual vehicle, this one from the other major superhero publisher. Of course, once that deep dive is over, I'll need more questions from you to answer for future episodes. Please send those in, or just comments on the show in general, via email. My email address is welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown, Twitter @GeektownPodcast, and Mastodon @welcome2geektown @mastodon.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips of the copyrighted material, their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.